All right, well, welcome to the podcast, Coretta. We're so excited to have you talking to us today about IEP&Me. My name is Annie, and I will be helping conduct this interview. And we are joined with Coretta Martin, who is the co-founder of IEP&Me. Before we kind of dive into the company, we're very curious to hear what your experience is and was, Coretta, with IEPs, special education, students with disabilities, stuff of that nature.
Yes, well, I am one of those privileged people who had the opportunity to be a teacher. I was a teacher I taught elementary school, I taught middle school, and I taught high school. And my journey in the K-12 space, particularly with supporting special education, has given me just firsthand insight in so much that is the experience for teachers and students with disabilities. When I taught elementary school, middle school, high school, teachers aren't supposed to have favorites, but just in case you did, I often had students who I built really strong relationships with who did have IEPs and did have different types of neurodiversities. And I always loved working with those students, thinking about, what are just some small tweaks to our Tier 1 instruction? What accommodation and modifications can I put in place to ensure that all students are successful? It's something that we say a lot as educators. We want all students to be successful, but really thinking about what does that look like as an educator was always really fun for me. And throughout that process, I learned a lot about individual education plans, or IEPs. So as I moved into school leadership, I had the opportunity to serve as the director of special education. When I was an undergraduate student, I actually studied communication disorders, audiology, and speech pathology. So I had decent familiarity with IDEA, a lot of familiarity with the classroom implementation of IEPs. So shifting into that role with my leadership skills was pretty smooth, but at that point, I experienced a lot of the challenges that ultimately led me to being a co-founder of IEP&Me. I experienced some of the communication barriers. I experienced many of the procedural challenges, some of the logistics, the paperwork, all the things that happen sort of behind the scenes that can really impact a student's educational process.
Awesome. And that very beautifully transitions us to the next question, which is, what is IEP&Me and kind of how did it come to be?
Yeah, so IEP&Me, in ways, it's actually a lot more than a company, but it is a company. It's a software company that is demystifying and revolutionizing special education to really help involve teachers, including general education teachers, related service providers, teachers, parents, families, community members in understanding the special education process from the creation of the IEPs to the implementation of the IEPs and the overall compliance of the IEPs. The initial idea, actually, my co-founder had around building a bridge of communication between schools, families, and students, and really thinking about how can we empower students. So the first iteration of the product was really more around student-led IEPs, student advocacy, but then it grew to thinking about, well, who are the other stakeholders left out? General education teachers, like myself, were often left out of the ins and outs and the nuances of compliance. Families often left out until the end of the process. Even administrators are often left out of the process until the IEP is already created. So what we want to do is create a platform that made it easier to manage and understand IEPs and increase the access so that the entire community of adults that advocate for students have access to individual education plans, can support with progress monitoring, have access to those progress reports, and can really truly support a student in being successful with their educational progress.
Amazing. And so based on your website and looking at the product itself, it seems like, so it's a software that schools and families can have access to, but can you maybe break down a little bit more the product user relationship of the software?
Yes. So at the heart of our design is like a really dynamic user-centered approach. We focus on making the IEP process, one, as I mentioned before, accessible. So we have a product that currently exists in many schools, but the only stakeholder who has access is often the special education teacher or the case manager. We wanted to increase that access so that The parents have the autonomy to have an online digital version of the IEP in an easy to read and simplified format. It also gives the ability to auto translate so that no matter what your most comfortable language is that you read in, you can have access to the IEP, and that you can share it to community members, you can share it with teachers, you can share it with outside tutors. So that access was really key. Then we moved to thinking about collaboration. Again, with the instant translation tool, folks can now collaborate despite what their spoken language might be. Folks can see how is a student doing on a particular goal or with a different accommodation, and they can share that information and really collaborate through messaging features and commenting features on goals. And then finally, really wanted to think about efficiencies. As former educators, what were the things that just drove us crazy when we were trying to write IEPs? What drove us crazy when we were trying to gather that data? What drove us crazy when it came to compliance and addressing all of that through our product for our users? Things like, when should this time out? Because I have to get up and go do dismissal, and then all of a sudden my IEP has disappeared. Or, just questions of who should have access and when, who should have what level of access. What version of the draft is just for me versus the rest of my team versus ready for the public to see. And thinking about all those small things that could be featured that our firsthand experience can apply to a product to make the end users, our teachers and families, really feel empowered to create effective plans, to empower students, and to understand and advocate for a student's need, not because they didn't want to, just because they might not have always had the information they required to do so previously, and just solving for that problem.
That's amazing. Yeah, it seems like accessibility is really at the heart here, like providing everyone in this partnership with easy access to the IEP and the different functionalities of it. So how have families responded to this product, those that have used it?
Yeah, so families are loving it. We've gotten a lot of really great feedback, just one on the format of our IEPs. We still have all the core, important, legally binding information in our IEPs, but we put it in a really easy to read format where you can quickly see what are the goals, what are the accommodations. And that's something that families really love. Even some of my friends, I have a friend, she has a PhD in artificial intelligence, and she's like, I don't know how to read my son's IEP. So it's really, really just been helpful for a lot of families just to have that simplified version. So we get a lot of feedback on that. Also, the ability to know who the educators are that are working with the students has been another thing that families really love. They often know the case manager or the special education teacher overseeing the IEP, but they may not always know the speech pathologist or even the occupational therapist, someone who doesn't see the student necessarily every day. So they really appreciate the ability to be able to log into IEP&Me and not just see that one educator, but see all the educators, start to connect some of the names to the services and be able to communicate directly with them just to find out how their student is doing in a more specific way.
That's great. It feels like it really puts the families in the driver's seat here, and they have a lot more power with what's happening with their child.
Yeah, for sure. I think also, parents are able to share the IEP, where traditionally parents often get the IEP as a printed out PDF. They can now have that online access where they can share with a new football coach or a Sunday school teacher or an outside tutor. So they now have this autonomy to share this information with who they feel comfortable having that information, who other people who work with their student, in just a little bit easier way without continuing to need to find a copy machine or take pictures of a PDF on their phone. So it feels a little bit more like they're in control of the document for their student.
For sure, especially as we move into just everything is digital these days, it feels like, this is something that obviously should also be digital.
Exactly.
So, okay, you've mentioned words like collaboration, advocacy, but it seems like family engagement actually is a core part of this work. So what is IEP&Me's family engagement strategy?
Yeah, so we actually have a strategy for engaging families, and it's a little bit twofold. One is access, as we mentioned before, and the other is more around education and empowerment. When it comes to access, our product is actually free for families. So families can go to our website, www.iepme.com, and they can create their own accounts. And what we're able to do is take the student IEP that they can upload as a PDF or an image, and we take the IEP and we put it in that easy to read format. When the parents sign up themselves, they then have to invite teachers, unfortunately, versus if a school teams up with us to support families. But that is at least step one in our way of ensuring that, okay, how do we make sure that families have access to something that we truly believe families should have access to be engaged in the process without having to rely on school sales. So that is something that was really important to us as we started our company. How do we have this free for families version? And that has actually picked up a lot of traction. Even globally, we have families who are signing up for the free version just to really be able to understand the individual education plan and share it as they see fit. Again, we also think a lot about the education and empowerment side. So we do a lot of webinars for families on empowering families through just being involved. We're really big on the idea of family and school partnerships and how much value there is in bringing all the voices and all the stakeholders in a student's life together. So we do a lot of webinars. We have a lot of resources on our platform for families on what are questions to ask during the IEP meeting. Not to be contentious, not to support, conflict, but really to support collaboration. Where should your voice be heard? What are the questions to ask? When we look at things that can be contentious, like behavior intervention plans, some students, I think most students, all students, I think you and I can both even agree, how you acted at school and how you acted at home might not have been exactly the same. That's actually really crucial data to have when you have a student who might be needing support with regulation or dysregulation. So making sure that families know, no, don't keep that information to yourself. It's crucial to the process. Or don't feel like you have to take a back seat in IEP meetings. Like speak up, share your stories, and collaborate with the teachers to figure out how can we make sure that the student's successful at school and at home. So it's really big on just informing parents of their rights. Again, not in a against the school way, in a really collaborative way, because that's really what's core, is bringing that village together and all the adult advocates together to support students.
Absolutely. And I think empowerment is a huge part of that too. By informing these parents, it empowers them inherently, just because now they have the information that they can bring forth into this process. So that was the family side of things. And I love that individual families can sign up for this. But thinking more on the school side, because I know you do have schools that partner with IEP&Me, can you tell us a little more about how you recruit these schools for the use of the product and kind of how those partnerships come to be?
Yes, so family engagement's a huge part of that, specifically in looking at schools. So we do sort of, we don't fish, we hunt. We do a little bit of both, but we do look for our schools intentionally to reach out to, because we love working with schools who already have either a strategic plan or a mindset to increase that level of collaboration. While you can still use our product without necessarily being 10 toes down on family engagement and collaboration, it does really set us apart. So we do look for schools who are already thinking about how can we engage families more into the academic process? How do we ensure that we are fostering an environment of knowledge and support and enabling families to be proactive and be informed participants in their child's education? And when we see schools that are already having those conversations, those are schools we definitely reach directly out to, because that is a really awesome way for us to just show how our platform can provide some of those tangible benefits to their priorities and to what they're trying to do with their families. We also go to a lot of conferences to meet schools, because for everyone who may not be openly there or not easy to find, it's always great to build new relationships. And for schools who might be earlier on their journey, having those conversations of how we can support with this process for families, and sometimes it's even general education teachers as a starting point. How do we make sure general education teachers are prepared so that when we start to bring families in, we know that everyone, at least internal to the school, is on the same page and prepared to discuss and collaborate on individual education plans for students. We Well, I have a lot of fun engaging with other educational leaders through workshops and presentations and various types of pilot programs to showcase how our tool enhances collaboration and compliance, making the IEP process a little bit more efficient and less daunting, because whether you're a school leader working on teacher retention, you're definitely thinking about how do we make work more efficient for our teachers. If you are a math specialist, I love math. But if you look at data historically across our country, many of our marginalized students through a disability classification or an IEP, that's the data that's showing up as not seeing the growth that we would like in mathematics. So even if you're focused on math, how are we making sure that we are teaching Tier 1 instruction to all students in a way that is supporting their ability to be successful in math, while also keeping in mind some of the Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports that would support them with being beneficial? We also house 504 plans, gifted and talented plans, multilingual learner plans, to really support the idea of, hey, schools, all these plans can be in one place. And for a general education teacher, I don't always need to know why you need extra time. I just need to know that you need extra time. So being able to house all of these plans in one place, allowing teachers to be familiar with one place, to collaborate on these plans, is something else I talk a lot with schools about, of just the benefits of that for all educators. We have almost 90% of educators are interfacing with a student with an IEP at least once a day throughout our country, but only about 40% of teachers have a special education certification. So knowing that there is already just a logistical disconnect between who's prepared and who's not, what are some of the tools and softwares that we can use to really just strengthen the ability for all educators to feel confident in a very, very high need area. About 1 in 5 students has a learning or language difference now. So we're talking about a lot of kiddos who are impacted in a positive way by just this increased communication and collaboration.
Absolutely. And there's obviously such a need for this. And I think something so powerful about this software is that, like you said, it's not just helping families and the student, but also the educators and the school community as a whole. So I'd imagine that's a big part of talking to these schools, is like, hey, this product is not just about students in the special education realm. It's actually helpful for everybody in the school community.
Sure.
So on that note too, and this is kind of our wrap-up question, but with all of your experience, both in the classroom, out of the classroom, with special education, with ed tech, and beyond, what are kind of your hopes, dreams, or vision for the future of education, and how does IEP&Me kind of support this or fit into this vision?
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier, we've often said all of our students are all of our students. And I think that's so true. And it's time for us to actually do something about that. If all students in a building are the responsibility of all teachers in the building, how are we ensuring that educators feel the confidence, feel the empowerment to be able to put in place what's needed for all students in a way that also doesn't burn us out? And I think that's what's next. We have seen coming out of the pandemic the benefits of personalized and individualized learning for all students, whether you have a neurodivergence, whether you have a learning disability, whether you're gifted and talented, whether you're learning your 3rd or 4th language. Everyone needs a little bit something different. So I have a vision for the future of education where literally every single child, regardless of their learning needs, regardless of their intellectual capacity, regardless to anything, has access to personalized, supportive, and really truly effective education. And at IEP&Me, we're really aiming to be at the forefront of this change by providing the tools and the resources that support inclusivity, that support collaboration, and support the creation of tailored learning experiences for all students. So I'm excited for the future of education. I love the way that artificial intelligence is going to lead us to doing this in very, very, effective and efficient ways. But that's a story for another day. So I'm really, really excited for where education is going. And I'm really excited to be building a tool that I truly believe, as a former educator, as a former instructional coach, as a former chief academic officer, I truly believe this tool will support schools in reaching that vision for the future of education.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Coretta, for talking with us today. It's been an honor and privilege working with you and learning all about IEP&Me and also just IEPs in general, special education journey. I think people listening to this podcast will also learn a lot. So yeah, just thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks for talking. I had a great day.
Thank you.